Here's a guy who thinks he has a reason why you should believe in God.
So the question is asked, why should I believe in God? Well, I have a few reasons. First of all, you're a moral person. Whether you like it or not, whether you say that objective morality is true or that it's false or a socially constructed thing, it's just subjective, you're a moral person. Because if I were to take money out of your wallet, you would say, give it back to me, that's mine.
No, I wouldn't. You already know it's mine. I wouldn't waste time appealing to morality. I'd just take it back from you.
You make moral claims when things happen around the world. That's awful. She was innocent. She didn't deserve that.
I've actually been trying to break the habit of speaking that way because it does imply an appeal to some objective moral standard which I don't believe exists. Rather, I try to say that something is intolerable to my conscience instead of saying it's wrong.
You make moral judgments when you view things. That means that you were built inside of you. You know, as sure as you are in existence, you know that there is a moral absolute of right and wrong.
No, I don't. I know that there are things that are tolerable or intolerable to my own conscience. The fact that things are either tolerable or intolerable to my conscience in no way indicates the existence of objective morality. In fact, even if there is a God, it still doesn't make any sense to say that anything is objectively moral or immoral because there's no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to follow the morality that God prescribes. Why ought we do what God says? Because he says so? William Lane Craig once said that God should be obeyed because of our duty to obey a competent authority. But where does this duty come from? If it exists independent of God, then at least one moral duty can exist without God. If this duty is based in God, then to assert that we have it is circular.
It's not just subjective. And with that being said, there certainly is a mind that defined it.
Then, by definition, it is subjective. That's what subjective means. It means that something is defined by a mind rather than being a description of mind-independent reality.
It's not just the material world. We're not just a brute fact, but rather there's something deeper for us to aspire to. Okay, Matt, but why believe in God? Why believe in a personal God? Well, there's wonderful evidence. If we look around the world, if we look at life, yes, there's difficulties and suffering and evil, but there's also a great deal of functionality in this world. I mean, the air that happens to be floating around us is perfectly what we need. We have these balls in our heads that help us see wonderfully. There's a great deal of goodness in this world that is visible and objectively good.
You're confusing consequences with functions. Air has the consequence of allowing us to breathe, not the function of doing so. Eyes have the consequence of allowing us to see, not the function. If your argument is that the world was designed by a good God because it has functions, then you're begging the question, because the word function already implies that these phenomena have a premeditated goal.
When you see two people who are estranged being reunited, or you see the birth of a baby for a couple that have been struggling to conceive, man, that's objectively good. You love to see that. When you see a child be taken care of and comforted by a parent, you see the goodness in that. That is objectively good.
The fact that I enjoy seeing certain things makes them objectively good? If I enjoy sardines on a pizza, does that make them objectively good?
And again, this points us towards a source of goodness.
It points us toward a source of the experience of enjoyment. Why can't that source be our own brains?
Okay, Matt, but why Christianity? Why do you believe God is a person? Why do you believe in Jesus Christ? Well, there's two real reasons. One, with the evidence we've been shown historically, archaeologically. If we just grant the minimal facts that we know surrounding the resurrection, we know that Jesus Christ existed.
I think we have a good reason to believe that he existed, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that we know it.
No good historian really denies that. Even Christian skeptics like Bart Ehrman will grant that. They'll also grant that we know Jesus predicted his death and resurrection.
We definitely don't know that. We know that people claimed that he predicted it. Other than hearsay, we have no evidence of that. That's not a reliable basis for knowledge.
As far as what we grant as corroborated historical fact, that is one.
By what was it corroborated? It would have been corroborated if we had multiple independent accounts of Jesus saying this, but we don't.
Thirdly, we know that the tomb was left empty.
No, we don't. We don't even know that there was a tomb. It was very rare for victims of crucifixion to be granted a dignified burial because the whole point of crucifixion was to put someone's carcass on display to humiliate him. The Gospels say that after Jesus was crucified, a guy named Joseph of Arimathea came around and offered to bury Jesus in a tomb that he had. This dude is not mentioned as having known Jesus in any of the other Bible stories, and nobody seems to be able to confirm whether Arimathea was even a real place, making it uncertain whether Joseph was even a real guy. So we actually have compelling reasons to doubt that there was even a tomb in the first place.
And lastly, we know the lives of the apostles, but not just the apostles, also non-believers that then claim they saw the risen Jesus, the brother of Jesus, James, but also Paul.
Paul actually never claims that he saw the risen Jesus. If you look at the description of his encounter, it says, "As he went on his way and was approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, 'Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?' He asked, 'Who are you, Lord?' He replied, 'I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting.'" He didn't see Jesus, he saw a light and heard a voice claiming to be Jesus. That's some pretty weak evidence of encountering a dead guy, even if Paul really had this experience.
Many other historians, including Josephus, Pliny the Younger, people like that, also wrote of Jesus' crucifixion.
They wrote down what Christians and others told them about Jesus' crucifixion. They weren't witnesses. They just repeated the Christian claims. So don't cite them as though they are independent corroboration.
We know that Jesus was a real person who died on the cross. And if you look at the life of the apostles and Paul and people like that, granted what I just went over, the existence of the supernatural and of a God, we know that resurrection is actually the most likely explanation.
Even if there is a God who occasionally resurrects people, resurrection is still not the most likely explanation. Because even if divine resurrections occur, they are still much, much more rare than lies, delusions, illusions, hallucinations, and cases of mistaken identity. Each of those happens far more than miraculous resurrections, and are therefore more probable than such events, even if a God exists.
But more than that, probably the best evidence, and the reason I actually became a Christian, is because Jesus Christ solves the very problem that plagues my soul. The problem that I spoke about earlier. We're moral beings, but I have no way of actually satisfying the moral obligation I feel in my heart.
Sounds like feels over reals to me. Also, if you feel satisfied that you've lived up to your moral obligations by accepting an innocent person being punished in your place, your conscience is very different from mine, which is much more consistent with the idea that morality is subjective.
We all know, if we're honest, that even if we say, I've tried my hardest to be a good person, that statement in and of itself is an admittance of guilt. I've tried my hardest to be a good person implies you failed. You failed.
Not necessarily. If I won a gold medal at the Olympics and someone asked how I did it, and I said, I tried my hardest to win that gold medal, would that imply that I did not, in fact, win it?
You just have, so have I. We all have. We've all fallen short. And only through Jesus Christ, only Jesus Christ works as an explanation of how we can actually balance the books.
Sure, if your conscience can tolerate an innocent person being tortured to death in your place.
If there is objective right and wrong that we established exists.
No, we didn't.
We know there must be some kind of comeuppance. There must be some kind of justice in the end. That absolute goodness must be satisfied. Otherwise, it never existed in the first place.
That's only the case if your conscience tells you that vicarious retribution is just. My conscience can't tolerate the retributive idea of justice at all, let alone vicarious retribution.
It would be like, because I made a mistake in mathematics, it just stays that way. No. Good math prevails over bad math. The same way absolute good is going to be satisfied if it exists. There is a personal God, the God of all goodness.
Because you use God as your standard of goodness, to say that God is a God of all goodness is a meaningless tautology.
And he actually put on human flesh and came down to satisfy goodness within you, to fulfill what you couldn't, but he also took the punishment that he didn't want you to have to take.
Yes, we all know he sacrificed himself to appease himself of the wrath that he felt for everyone else. This apparently makes sense to you somehow.
There are plenty of reasons for you to believe in God, but the best one is because what Jesus Christ did for you on the cross was a personal love letter to you saying, I love you and I will die for you.
If this is a reasonable, objectively correct system of justice, why don't we practice it in any human courts? Why don't we allow spouses to go to prison on behalf of their partners, or parents to go to prison on behalf of their children? Why do most of us see that as absurd in any other circumstance? To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.